everybody. I'm Pastor Dwayne. I'm here with Sharice Johnson, and we're ready for another Consider This interview where we're going to talk about mental health. And so, Sharice, if you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure.
And that way everybody will learn more about you.
Yeah. So, like you said, I'm Sharice Johnson. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor, and I have a practice here in Charlotte called Jade Integrative Counseling and Wellness, where I focus on kind of holistic wellness, and I'm a spiritually integrative therapist as well.
Okay, tell us what that means when you say spiritually integrative.
Yeah.
What is that?
So I am also licensed in pastoral counseling as well. So well-versed in making sure that if someone comes in and they have a desire to go, hey, faith is important to me, it's something that I want to be a resource, knowing how to implement that in a way that kind of honors where they are in their walk.
How would you define mental health? And to what extent is it important to everybody, including Christians?
Yeah. So mental health essentially affects how you think, how you believe, and how you act. And so we typically say bio, psycho, social, and spiritual. So you've got to look at the biological factors, which are going to be kind of like physically, genetically, psychological, which means your own mental health. Social, our social environment, how we grew up socially plays a huge role in mental health. And then spiritually, spiritual walk, spiritual life, spiritual traumas. But you absolutely want to look at that whole recipe in order to go. My mental health is comprised of all four of those, especially if you're a Christian. A lot of times individuals who are not Christians will leave out the spiritual and they'll just focus on the biological, the psychological, and the social.
So I find that interesting already, because you think it would go the other way, that I really want to deal with this spiritual part of it, but we'll leave that part out. Why do you think that many Christians would leave that part out?
Yeah. Well, I think they're uncomfortable, with putting the two together. And then if we look at the historical origins, which I promise I won't go all into, of Christianity and psychology, they haven't always meshed. So one quick piece, we have what's called nouthetic counseling, which just focuses on scripture. So there's a big undertone that says everything you need has to only be in the Bible and nothing else should be added. And we're still holding on to that, as well as different beliefs that people have heard from the pulpit that make them feel if they're right with God, then they wouldn't have any challenges with mental health.
But the reality is, as Christians, we still deal with issues. We still have past. There's still things that we're working through, right? And so with that in mind, is there a such thing as good or bad mental health?
Absolutely. When your mental health is in a good place, you're going to be able to think clearly. You're going to be able to respond well in interpersonal interactions. You will sleep well, eat well, take care of yourself. Like, you can see the fruit of that in your everyday life. If my mental health has moved to a place where it's no longer healthy, then it's going to start to show up as little ruptures in my life. I might be exhausted and not want to wake up. I'm dealing with fatigue. I'm always sad. I'm always anxious. I am starting to cry often or become irritable. So we're kind of offline with our typical base. And that's how we know, okay, something about those four components that we just talked about, they're not in alignment. They're not unified.
Well, what about the idea of just, put your head down, muscle through it, just get through it?
Yeah.
You just got to get to the other side.
Absolutely not. It doesn't work long term. There are moments where we may have to say, I have to put this to the side for the moment because I'm not in a situation right now where I can deal with it. But it's so important for us to go back and go, okay, now I need to take that box off of the shelf. I will often give people the analogy that when we say, I'm going to power through, not going to worry about that, it's like taking it, putting it in a box and putting it on a shelf. Or after a while, you keep putting boxes on that shelf, it's going to fall down. The shelf will break. It got too heavy. And then that's often what happens. And then people are looking at this and they're like, I'm terrified. There's so many boxes there, I don't even know where to start. And I'm almost afraid to see what's in them because I've pushed them away for so long. So it's a temporary fix that doesn't last long term.
That's good, because that makes a lot of sense to me, and how we keep stuffing things away. And so it brings to me the idea of our physical health. And do you see how a person should take care of their physical health and their mental health as the same? Should both of them have an equal footing in our lives?
Absolutely. So we are mind body connected. Anything that we think shows up in how we act. It also shows up in our physical symptoms. Like, for example, when I was talking about we might feel anxious or we might feel tired, a lot of times our body is going to tell us what's going on with our mind.
Wow.
We are excellent at rationalizing, oh, I'm good, I'm doing well, but we know internally, okay, every part of me hurts. My back hurts. I'm constantly having headaches. Likewise, when we're active, when we're moving, for example, God has designed our bodies that it creates endorphins that only occur when we're in motion. It's actually a helpful way for us to move through those frustrations that we're handling. So it's phenomenal.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So moving helps us to move through.
Absolutely.
But it's not the only way, but it definitely, the getting up and moving our bodies
Yes.
helps us to move through. So then we should not treat mental health and physical health as two different compartments.
Correct.
These things have to blend together.
Yeah, they work best together, which is why a lot of people struggle. We tend to want to, what I call, symptom manage. So we'll go in and say, I just want this one thing to stop. Just help me to stop feeling anxious. But we can't do that without looking at your entire life. What's going on for you socially? What's going on for you financially? What's your spiritual life like? Have you, walked away from things? Are you moving? What are you eating? All of those pieces are how we're designed by God.
Right, just other life things that are happening, like you said, moving or going back to school. You're having another child, that's awesome. Okay, so then what are some ways that a person can take care of their mental health? We know that when we talk about physical health, we talk about go to the doctor, we talk about going to the gym, walking, eating right, but when it comes to mental health,
Sure.
How do we have good mental health care?
Yeah. So there are a lot of different ways. One of the easiest ways to kind of think about it is what I like to call your vital habits.
Okay.
So ideally, we want to wake up in the morning and really be engaging in our spiritual practices, and consistently, not just when we're at a place of distress. So having a routine of our quiet, meditative time, praying, reading into scripture. We are.
Okay, that sounds like every preacher every Sunday, right?
I know, but there's.
But it works. It works.
It's work. Because here's the thing: we're consumers.
Yeah.
So what that means is a lot of what we're experiencing comes from what we're taking in. And so if I wake up in the morning and I haven't taken anything in, and then I go into my day and social media and what this person says and what's happening in the world, it's like an onslaught that I'm not prepared for. So we have to fortify ourselves before we engage with anything else. A phone analogy: if our phone stayed unplugged, they would die and not be able to operate. We have to treat ourselves and our mental health as the same way, but then we have to ask ourselves, what am I plugging into?
Wow.
What's the first thing that I'm picking up in the morning? Am I looking at everything that's going on, all of my worries and all of my concerns? Or am I kind of sitting, listening, praying, journaling, and kind of downloading my message for the day?
Right.
And then kind of using that to operate from, versus all of a sudden it's been a hard day and now I'm trying to catch up and it's a battle.
So we end up working behind it. That's okay. That's awesome. So then let me ask you about this. Many times we, when dealing with our own mental health, or excuse me, our physical health, we end up waiting until too many things have happened. And now we need surgery. We need some other serious means of taking care of it.
Yeah.
Is this very similar to what happens to people in their mental health?
100%. Yeah. We wait until the absolute last moment. So then we find that we're being reactive instead of proactive. You know, we want to be proactive. We want to be doing things daily that help us not get to that point, because it's much more challenging to try to repair, or it's overwhelming, or there's damage in many different areas when we wait. And not only damage to ourselves, if our mental health isn't good, that's impacting the people around us. So we also have to go, how is that impacting my marriage, my relationship with my children, my relationship at work, my ability to run my business or any other area of our lives?
So you would agree that taking care of our own mental health is a part of taking care of the people that we love?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because we're interconnected. We're built for community. So there is no way, despite our best interest, you know, our efforts to plow through, to hide that. You know, if you've ever been with someone that you know well, you know when they're not okay, even if they're not saying anything. Our kids, our children, even our small children who can't verbalize anything yet, they can still sense.
Yeah.
And they know when we're off. And a lot of times they may be acting out what we're feeling, and we think that they don't see. One of the most telling signs that our mental health is starting to shift is in our thoughts. And so noticing, is there a thought that you're having that you can't let go of? So we call that rumination, where you're kind of incessantly going over a situation over and over. Are there thoughts that are negative towards yourself that are getting in the way of what you do? So there's this negative inner dialogue, this inner critic that's constantly playing in the background. That would be a sign that something is off balance, and then that's out of line with what God thinks about you, and then what He wants us to think about ourselves. So our thought life is the absolute first line of defense. It's what we know. We hear it. We are operating from that place of pain. We are just often ashamed and feel guilty. And so that's challenging. You don't want to admit that that's what you're saying to someone because of the fear of judgment. But most of us know. We hear the dialogue, we just hide it. We're working so hard to try to hide it.
And that's the idea of wearing the mask. I'm fine. I got it. I can handle it. But when does it become a cry for help?
A lot of times, the cry for help doesn't come until something is so drastic. So everybody's cry for help is going to look different depending upon what they've been through, right? The challenge is, if someone has grown up in a lot of trauma, then what they're experiencing becomes their normal. And so a lot of times, especially if we're talking about people of color, for example, there are so many different traumas that we experience before age 10, more or less before 20 or 30 or 40, that we literally become used to. This is just how life is. And so to protect ourselves, we minimize. So the cries for help are actually always there. We just may honestly not recognize them because we don't know anything different. Life has always been uncertain, a little chaotic, constantly changing. We're fighting through. That's our normal. And so we begin to believe this is just the way things are. So I'm just going to keep going.
And you mentioned trauma. So the idea of trauma, we often think that, okay, well, this person went through a lot worse than I went through, and so then they need more help than I do, or vice versa. But really, trauma is trauma, right?
Yeah, trauma is subjective. There are two types of trauma. So you have little T trauma and big T trauma. Big T trauma is major car accident, something that's a one-time situation that was significant that occurred. Little T trauma is like a little trickle of something that's commonly happening. So a little T trauma could be growing up in the household with someone who's verbally abusive. Little T trauma could be not having enough food. Little T trauma could be, I'm never sure when I turn on the switch that the lights will come on.
Yeah.
Is my mom or dad or uncle or nephew or brother going to be here to pick me up today, or will I have to walk home?
Yeah.
Those are examples to little t trauma, and those are much more damaging because they happen consistently over time and kind of wear down our nervous system. So in that case, someone who has had those kind of repeated situations, their cry for help will be harder to see, but more significant because there's already a big recipe underneath.
And it sounds like it's just ongoing. Just like you said, that trickling, that's ongoing, but it can really cause a lot of damage.
A lot.
You mentioned something I thought was really significant about how having good mental health, taking care of yourself in that way, also takes care of others.
Yeah.
And so then when I think about men and how we want to be providers, we want to take care of our families, what happens is a lot of men don't take care of their mental health. And I wonder how that affects the family if the man of the home,
Sure.
or the male of the home, isn't handling their mental health.
Yeah. It can be extremely challenging. And when you say, men want to be providers and take care of their family, one, you have to look at what is their definition of taking care of their family. So again, historically, the definition is provider means I'm able to physically provide for your needs and financially provide for your needs. It is a completely different mindset for most men to understand that also means they need to emotionally help take care of and nurture their wife or their children. They're very used to compartmentalizing,
Right.
and that piece not even being talked about. When I've worked with families and you have either, but particularly, the man in the home who isn't taking care of the mental health, the other family members will often talk about feeling like they're under hostage, depending upon what's displaying, right? And so when dad is okay, then okay, we can all kind of move about and it's a good day and we're fine. But when they sense dad might be more quiet or more secluded or not talking, then everybody's a little bit more uncertain or isolated and backed away.